Welcome to Bahai Chat. We're so happy really to have everyone here with us today. Bahai Chat is a conversation series dedicated to our interconnectedness. It's an uplifting moment when we can turn our thoughts to spiritual ideas. Each weekly session is rooted in the Bahai writings and the fundamental teachings of the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of humanity. Conversations led by individuals who are putting these principles into action. We are live streaming. You've probably seen the note in chat. We're live streaming today's conversation on Facebook. So please do connect to that link and share that stream. You'll find it at the bottom of your Zoom view. The Bahai Faith is the youngest of the independent world religions, having been born in Iran in 1844. Its prophet founder, Baha'u'llah, a title meaning the glory of God, spent 40 years in prison and endured 4 successive exiles. The most fundamental teachings of the Bahai Faith are the oneness of God, the interconnectedness of all of the major world religions, and the oneness of mankind. Baha'is believe that this is the long anticipated day of God, prophesied by every one of God's messengers when the kingdom of God will finally be established. Throughout Baha'u'llah's 40-year-long ministry, he revealed thousands of extraordinary tablets and prayers comprising over 100 volumes of writings that have been translated into 800 languages. Perhaps the essence of Baha'u'llah's message, to which he's calling all mankind, can be expressed in its simplest form in this brief phrase. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. Baha'u'llah's writings include the blueprint for the establishment of a new world order. He eliminated the clergy, replacing the need for those former institutions with the requirements for universal education, independent investigation of truth, and a wholly new system of governance, its embryonic pattern already well established throughout the world, a system devoid of practices that divide and separate, a system that includes an array of fixtures conducive to unity. This was necessary because, as Baha'u'llah prophesied more than a century and a half ago, the winds of despair are, alas, blowing from every direction, and the strife that divideth and afflicteth the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appears to be lamentably defective. We are certainly bearing witness to the truth of these words today. We're all experiencing the anxiety of it now in real time. But as difficult as is traversing this period, we're assured in the writings of Baha'u'llah that we're on the verge of a new day. It is, after all, the will of God, as promised in the scriptures of each of the world's great religions, that we would realize a day on earth that will mirror the reality of the spiritual kingdom. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We've been told over the centuries by each of God's messengers that through the upheaval of unprecedented, catastrophic times, mankind will ultimately emerge as a new race of men, finally mindful of our Creator's eternal guidance. This day, of course, is referred to, as I mentioned in Christian scripture, as the kingdom of God on earth. So what will the kingdom of God look like? How will it be built? Well, that's the subject of today's chat. While the world seems to be falling down around us, there is a quiet, almost imperceptible process that has been taking place for decades now in cities, towns, villages, hamlets, and neighborhoods in virtually every country in the world. Millions of Baha'is, together with friends from every religion, every race, creed, and ethnic background, are working together, weaving a rich tapestry of community life. And that's our topic today. We have some guests with us that are intricately involved in this process. We're going to chat with them and get their take on this extraordinary movement. I'd like to start first by introducing Continental Board of Counselor member Nwandi Lawson. Counselor Lawson is a West Coast native. She received an MBA from Emory University and an undergraduate degree in journalism from Howard University. She's an entrepreneur in Atlanta who has experience hosting, writing, and producing for commercial and public broadcasters, including CNN, TBS, and Georgia Public Broadcasting. Nwandi has been a Baha'i since 2001 and currently serves the Continental Board of Counselors for the Americas, an institution appointed on each continent by the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of the worldwide Baha'i community. Nwandi, we are so delighted and honored really to have you with us today. You take time out of your very busy schedule. Welcome to the chat.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Or I'm on mute. There we go. Try it again.
Very good. Well, I appreciate your generous introduction, David. I'm excited to join this chat.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. I'd like to begin by asking you just to take a few minutes, give us a bit of background on the administrative order of the Bahai Faith, some of its unique features, and the role of the Continental Board of Counselors.
Well, that is a big question, I think, that we're all learning about. But, I think it ties back into a quote that you were using as the introduction, where you spoke about the current systems that we have as being lamentably defective, right? So we know that we need to undergo changes as mankind continues to mature. The Baha'i Faith is one that believes that all of the previous religions and so forth have brought us to the point that we are today. And it's one where we're really on the cusp of coming to a greater maturity. So if in fact the current systems are defectively lamentable, we can't just continue to kind of tinker around the edges, nor can we walk around being social critics and just say, well, my goodness, that is so lamentable. So instead, the Baha'i Faith, under the guidance, of course, of the prophet founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, began the process of constructing the type of institutions that will enable all mankind to become one. And so we have what are elected institutions, those being our national spiritual assemblies and our local spiritual assemblies, and even in each region in big countries, we have regional Baha'i councils. And then at the other side, at the very highest level, of course, we have the Universal House of Justice, which you mentioned actually is the world governing body for the Baha'is, and which also appoints a certain set of people who serve the institutions. And one of those institutions is that of the counselors. So as you mentioned, these are appointees of the Universal House of Justice. They serve on all of the continents, 81 of them throughout the world, and are focused primarily on making sure that education and spiritual upliftment are present on each of the continents.
Well, you have over the past few years been developing a fascinating documentary series entitled A Rich Tapestry, stories that express and illustrate how love is being translated into action. It's available on the website Bahai.us. So tell us a little bit about the series and what prompted you to create it.
Well, I'm not the creator, but I think that it's significant. The National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States is actually the producer, and I get to serve as one of the team of people who bring the videos to life. But actually, the Universal House of Justice is very much responsible for this, because many years before we reach the point that we are today, when we see the eruption of protests and people really seeking out justice that is born from a spirit that really seeks to see oneness in the world, one in which we do not see people being killed because of race or in other ways being oppressed. Well, based on not just speaking about these things, but also working very strategically to make sure that we contribute to the forward progress of our nation, the United States, and making sure that many of these barriers to unity that people currently don't know of, that we actually address them. So we have a number of ways of doing that. Today, we're going to focus a lot on what happens at the level of the community. That is expansion and consolidation. People are able to teach and to learn together and to figure out how to apply these solutions in their communities. But we also have other means of doing that. We have social action, which in a Baha'i context sometimes looks a little different than what maybe we might describe as social action. It really emerges from the aspirations of the people in every community. And it's really based on the writings of God, the word of God as at its center, so that the means and the ends are always consistent with one another. And then there's also public discourse. That is Baha'is attempt to contribute to their own societies some of the teachings that come from our faith, those being the oneness of humanity centrally. So A Rich Tapestry is actually a series of videos that tries to demonstrate what you said, that love can be translated into action. It's not enough to speak of my love for you and to do nothing, but actually we have to learn together how it is that we can express this in community building. So the Rich Tapestry series captures the ways in which different races, different classes, different genders, different ages come together to weave this rich tapestry of community life.
Well, you actually selected a quote that goes to all of this.
Let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Baha'u'llah.
This is really such a poignant and brief commentary. Talk a little bit about how that really drives everything.
And we know even from the previous religions and those that have come even before the time of Baha'u'llah, that if we have faith and no action, then our faith is dead. So we really are striving by day and by night to make what it is that we see as justice, as peace, as unity. We want to actually live it out. And we recognize, of course, as Baha'is, that this society that we seek to build will not be seen in its full entirety in our lifetime. However, like all the previous generations that came before us, we want to make some contribution to its forward progress. We want to make sure our contribution is systematic and not just a haphazard series of steps.
So looking at, we're all, I think, reeling from the last months and certainly the last couple of weeks with the terrible, terrible killing of George Floyd and all of the things that have happened since then. Considering the current events and events, maybe from the time that Baha'u'llah appeared in the middle of the 19th century, how do we apply this? What are we doing? What is our part in the process?
Mm-hmm. And I think, everyone is in a common process right now, because unlike any previous time, we really are having a mutual experience. I have the good fortune to have a 98-year-old grandfather who is still with me in this world, Reverend Casper Isaiah Glenn. And I was just speaking to him on the phone yesterday. So he had the opportunity, of course, being born in 1922, to move through many, many, many movements. He had a chance to work with Dr. King and others on civil rights. He had a chance to live and work in Africa and to really address human rights. But he usually tells me whenever I bring up any of the matters happening in my lifetime that, oh, well, that's much smaller in scope. At the beginning of the pandemic, I asked him and he agreed, this is actually quite vast and quite serious. He said, there was a polio epidemic when I was a boy, but we didn't have to walk around wearing masks. So consequently, yes, this is much more. I checked in with him yesterday about the current state of affairs. And one, I was delighted because he did not have words to kind of put down those who are manifesting their feelings in a variety of different ways and who are striving for justice in different ways. He had nothing but very congratulatory words for the young people of today and what they're trying to do. We did talk, though, about the fact that when he was working on trying to desegregate areas of Arizona and other places in the South and in the West, that they actually had to work very systematically at that they couldn't just get up that day and go and have a march. It actually required them to study. Everyone had read Mahatma Gandhi. Everyone was studying what it was that Dr. King was putting into print. And then they were making a plan. They were going out, carrying out that plan. And then they couldn't just finish the march and say, we're finished. They had to come back and reflect on the action and figure out how to keep going. So we all are the recipients of the work that they have done. And I think this quote, let deeds, not words, be your adorning, is our mission statement to keep moving forward and to remember that it does require systematic action. It really can't be haphazard if we want to achieve the goal that we're looking for.
Love that story. In your tapestry, or in the tapestry series, you talk about 4 elements of a rich tapestry of community life: elevated conversation, growing capacity to serve, carrying out acts of service, and accompanying others on similar paths of service. So let's talk a little bit about the four components and maybe share a few examples.
Absolutely. Well, the nice thing about the four components is that they are accessible to everyone, right? People who are Baha'is, people who are not Baha'is, anyone can do this, right? So let's take the first one, an elevated conversation. So today, there's many ways we can look at what's happening around us. And to be sure, many of them, the things that we see make us sad, make us angry. However, will our responses be productive? So if someone were to come up to me, as they do sometimes, and they want to tell me that, the problem with this particular day and age is that the political system is absolutely broken. And they then want to, talk about a number of political figures and so forth. Well, a few principles there as a Baha'i. One is that I don't involve myself in politics because politics are inherently divisive. And then two, the fact that I don't go around disparaging other people. I do my best to avoid backbiting and gossiping because, again, these are very divisive. So I might then ask my friend, who is understandably and very reasonably angry or sad, to see if we can't address this by some actions that we can take, and maybe our own spiritual desire to see unity or to see justice. And so I might even ask that person, I can see in your sadness or in your anger that you really have a quest for justice. And did you know that actually, according to the Bahai Faith, justice is the best beloved of all things in the sight of God? So once we've elevated the conversation, we might then decide that we want to take some action. And much like my grandfather referenced, we can't just randomly off the top of our head think of these things. We have to actually study together so that we can become more familiar with what is it that we're addressing and how do our spiritual and our material qualities come together. So we might arrange, we might say, hey, let's get a few friends together and we can study some of these words of God and see how we can apply them to the situation in which we find ourselves. Do we wish to maybe address our concerns to the children in our neighborhood? Are we worried that the teenagers, as people often say, they're running amok? Well, maybe they're not, but maybe their quest for justice could be better channeled if they had some system by which to channel that. So maybe we can learn to become animators of the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. Maybe our neighbors are very sad and just coming together and saying prayers together regularly would be a way that we could inspire a little bit of joy in their hearts. And then, of course, within the Baha'i Faith, we're very focused on capacity building. So it wouldn't be enough for me to hold all of the strings, if you will, for me to be the only one that knew how to carry out this system of education, or who knew how to teach children, or how to animate a junior youth group, or to host a devotional gathering for prayer. I would actually be very focused on inviting my friends to do exactly the same. So this idea then of training, helping people to grow in their own capacity, which is a continual thing. You never graduate from this, by the way. You keep saying, what's the next vista? And we have some friends who are joining us today who can talk a little bit about their experience in that process as well. But then the fourth and highest level that we're all striving for is that we can actually help someone else. Help someone else to do what it is that brought you so much joy and that is helping you advance.
This is wonderful. And we have a clip, a short clip, one of the tapestry segments, each one reach one, which I think illustrates it, what you're talking about really, really beautifully. Let's take a quick look at that and then we'll talk a little more about it.
Within this pocket, there's such a large diversity. So we see people coming from many ethnic and religious backgrounds.
And this area is very beautiful because there is a big park, and surrounding the park are residential areas. Some are apartment complexes, some are two-story homes.
And surrounding the park are the schools. So we have the high school, the middle school, and 2 local elementary schools.
There are Africans, Asians, people of Arab descent, and also all Americans from all different parts. There are 3 home front pioneers, young ladies who, through different conversations and the opportunities that were seized opened the door for this service.
We have different people that come in as we reach out to others, and as the people we reach out to their friends and bring them in. We've quickly realized that we can't do it all on our own.
On a practical level, we must ensure that each person we engage feels welcome to participate according to his or her interests. Some might benefit from home visits as a prelude to further engagement. Others might be eager to begin with a sequence of institute courses right away.
One of the things that I love the most is the team of outreach that we have. It's us three, and then people in the wider community that come to help us outreach. And then I'll look and I'm like, oh, we have like 5 different languages with us right now. We're like Spanish, English, French, Arabic, and Farsi. So it's like, it doesn't matter who opens the door.
The other day, the teacher was preparing for the children's class. One of the junior youth who comes in and practices on the guitar asked the teacher, what are you doing?
I came on Wednesday because I wanted to practice guitar. But then a widow told me that she was having a children's class, so I decided to help her.
And then he was like, what do you do every time? And I was told, so there's a portion for prayer, there's a portion for quotations and coloring, and there's a song. And I'm like, you could help me with the song if you want. And then he was like, sure. I was like, well, look at it. And so he looks at the song and he starts practicing it on the guitar. I'm like, I'm not musically inclined, so like, you can definitely help me out. And then he was like, yeah, let me ask my mom. And then so he texted his mom and asked her, and she said, that sounds wonderful. And she okayed it. And then I was like, I'll be right back. I have to go get some of the kids and remind them. And then I was like, hold on. I was like, you speak Spanish, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you could help me with some of the parents that speak Spanish. So I went to a mother that spoke Spanish, and he explained what was happening in the class, how long the class was, and what the virtue of the class was going to be, or the lesson of the class was going to be that day, to where I was just sitting there just watching them interact. I'm like, is she good? And then she's like, yeah, she'll come.
I just always wanted to teach. Probably when I grow up, I could become a real teacher, like in our school.
Something tells me he is a real teacher now in the process. We're going to have a group conversation in just a minute, but I was wondering, Councilor Lawson, if you had any comments just about that segment, anything that occurred.
Well, I hope that, I see that people are asking some questions in the chat about, getting started, and some of them are specific to social distancing. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about that. But in particular, I hope that everyone's taking note of the fact that everyone who comes into this process, this happens to be a neighborhood in Houston, Texas, but everyone is a protagonist. Too often when we are starting something, we're just thinking of ourselves as the ones who are the central actors, the central figures, if you will, in the drama that's unfolding in a neighborhood. So forever and ever and ever, Abigail in that story could have just been teaching the children's class by herself. Abigail, by the way, is now serving at the World Center in Haifa, the Bahai World Center. But she wasn't so inclined just to keep the service to herself. She was listening very, very perceptively. And when the young man who just stopped by, really because they have a guitar and he wanted to play guitar. So she could have, as the children's class teacher, just let him sit there and play guitar. But wait a minute. Hey, there's a song here. If no one plays the guitar, I'll just have to try to sing it myself. You can do that. Then again, perception. Wait a minute, you speak Spanish, right? I normally struggle with the parents that I'm having to explain to them what we're doing. Come. So you are now very much at the center of this drama. And that's how you build capacity in others. And that's how you avoid having a place where everyone's going, oh my goodness, I'm so worn out. I can't go on. All of the weight rests on me. In fact, all of the people from the first day you ever meet them are capable of assisting you in this. They have some value to the process of actually moving your community forward.
Such a great conversation. And speaking about expanding, we've got 3 wonderful guests joining us here from the Atlanta area today. Khadija Abdul-Jabbar, Serena Hutchinson, and Shannon Croft. Let me just introduce each of them briefly. Khadija was inspired by her mother, who was a classical pianist, to pursue excellence in music. She earned undergraduate and graduate degrees in education and Spanish from Clark Atlanta University and the Middlebury Language School in Madrid, Spain. She's served as a high school Spanish teacher and an education consultant through her company, Educate Me Homeschool Services. She's currently completing her Waldorf educator training while also taking part in activities of the Metro Atlanta Baha'i community, including the study of Book 4, The Twin Manifestations. Khadija, welcome to the chat.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. Well, Khadija is joined today by Serena Hutchinson, and Serena is a 14-year-old dance major at DeKalb School of the Arts. She's also a member of the Apprentice Corporation for the modern dance company Moving in the Spirit. She's in her third year of the Baha'i Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, and she hopes to study aerospace engineering because she's curious about what's beyond the earth, and she's been inspired by stories of her grandmother's work at NASA. So welcome, Serena. Welcome to the chat. So
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And now joining Serena and Khadija is Shannon Croft. Shannon is new this year to learning about the Bahai Faith, is currently in an inspiring study circle where he and several friends are studying the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the twin manifestations or prophets of the Bahai Faith. Shannon is a child psychiatrist and psychoanalyst trained at Emory University. He now works with college students at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Shannon, welcome to the chat.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you. Great to have you. So let's start by maybe framing the discussion by opening with a quote from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States about this community building process.
On a practical level, we must ensure that each person we engage feels welcome to participate according to his or her interests. Some might benefit from home visits as a prelude to further engagement. Others might be eager to begin the sequence of institute courses right away. Again, that's from our National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States from December 8th, 2018.
I have a question for you all sort of as a group, but before I ask it, we already have a number of questions in the Q&A. Just like to remind you, as we're advancing, feel free to place your questions there. So the idea that each person can participate in this community building process in whatever way inspires and makes them happy, it's great. So I'd like to have each of you talk a little bit about your own personal experiences in that process, how you connected, what inspires you most. Just have a bit of a conversation.
Who wants to jump in there first? Shannon?
I'll jump in there first. I'm happy to. You know, about a year ago, I just was curious about Baha'i, and I heard some things as sort of reading, and I dropped by one of the local places that was getting together and met someone. And through meeting somebody, I started meeting with Tahere, who's one of my friends here in the neighborhood, and who has started talking to me and teaching and explaining a lot of things. And very quickly, we started a book one study. And Khadija, who's here, is one of my dear friends from that and has meant a lot to me. And then through that, I became involved with a weekly meeting. We have a weekly Food for the Soul now, before it wasn't every week. And we also participate in Meaningful Conversations, and that's a weekly event that's put on. And these are very different events, but they're very similar in that it's a lot of the same people. And these are all, I think, elevated conversations like Nwandi was talking about before. And now Khadija and I and some other friends are in a book 4 study, and it's been really exciting. I've really enjoyed it. So that's sort of my little story of the last year.
Thank you for sharing that. Serena, Could you speak a little bit about your experience in the junior youth program over the past 3 years, what you've learned, what excites you about it? Tell us a little bit about the program.
Okay, sure. As of this moment, I am studying the Spirit of Faith book with my junior youth group. And actually, me and one of the other members in our group started our junior youth group. And basically, it was just, we said that we were ready to start a group. And we thought about what that consisted of. And so we asked our older siblings, because we're both younger siblings. So we asked our older siblings what we kind of needed to do to be able to start our junior youth group and what we needed to start the group. And so we gathered some friends that were also like our age range. And we asked 2 members of our community, adults, if they could animate our junior youth group. And they were like, yes, we would love to do that. And so our group started, but in the program, I don't know, I feel like I'm not really like studying a book. I know like right now we're Zoom and things, but I feel like when we used to be like in person, we'd have like a service project normally after we finish a book. And I feel like those really helped us to connect. Like we normally structure our service project around what the book was about, or like things that we pulled from the book that we said we want to use and take these into our community. And I think that was really helpful, so we could all like see what we took from the book, what we got out of the book, and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're a dancer.
I am, yes.
Have you been able to sort of weave that into the process?
I haven't actually done that so far. I think that would be kind of cool to see how I could do that moving forward, but I haven't done that.
I'm sure when the time is right. Khadija, any quick thoughts? We're going to take a look at a clip here in just a minute, but what are your thoughts?
I came upon the Bahai Faith as I was looking for a youth group for my daughter. And we have a wonderful friend in our school community who hosts monthly Friday gatherings and devotionals, which allow for people to come and learn more and have that elevated conversation. And ultimately, I was able to find a youth group, a Bahai youth group for my daughter, where she could be of service, which was very important to me, that we're of service in our community. And from there, I started studying with Tahiri and Shannon in book 1, and now we're in book 4. And it has been an amazing experience to be a part of these elevated conversations, but to also know that there are other people who are ready to take those conversations and transform them into deeds within the community. And that's really exciting for me. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Well, it's a wonderful story. Khadija and Shannon, as part of your study of book 4, the twin manifestations, you each created artwork, painting and poetry to express your encounters with the Bab and Baha'u'llah. You are featured in a lovely video created for the Declaration of the Bab, Holy Day, collaboration by the entire Atlanta area cluster and the House of Worship. Let's take a little look at a short clip, and then maybe we can share a little bit your thoughts and experiences in that joint project.
Our study of book 4 has been a special journey. I enjoy coming together to read the stories and to reflect on the experiences of early Baha'is. One of the things that has been really special to me is how the stories stay with me throughout the day, and they fertilize how I show up in my experiences. And one of them really stood out to me, which was the story of Baha'u'llah's father speaking of his dream of his son, and the love you could feel in the story, even with all the unknown and uncertainty around who his son would be and what his journey would be, was absolutely beautiful.
Wake now, dreamers, it is time. It is past midnight when you startle awake. He is gone and you go searching in the dark. Look there, at the mountain base in the midnight dark. You see his figure, standing there alone, his arms aloft. And now you are both in the room upstairs. He floats up into the air, bathed in light. Are you awake or asleep? Are you dream or dreamer? But hear the sweet tones of his lilting voice. If you could only make out the words. And do you see the tears streaming down his cheeks? So, I've been in a Book 4 study circle with some great friends here in Decatur, Georgia, and we were all really transfixed by the story of Mullah Hussein arriving in Shiraz and meeting a young man who invites him to his home to refresh himself. And what ensues in that upstairs room, where Mullah Hussein gradually hears that this is the promised one. And that moment when he hears this commentary on the Surah of Joseph and he knows this is it, this is the promised one I was searching for. And this made me very curious, and I think a lot of us read other stories and details about the Bab's life. And even as a child, over and over, people recounted stories of seeing the Bab in a garden, alone in a room, in the distance, at the base of a mountain, often after a long day of journeying, by himself, deep and fervent prayer, and how often people noticed tears streaming down his face. At first, I imagined perhaps these tears were tears of pain and sorrow. After all, the Bab could see all the past and all the future and knew all the torment and difficulties that would befall his followers and his loved ones. But the more we studied together and the more we read, I gradually understood that these tears were not tears of sorrow and sadness, but these tears were tears of joy, for the Bab was communing directly with God. And the incredible ecstatic pleasure of that connection and how that carried out on how the Bab lived and spread the message. And so I wanted to write a poem to capture this understanding and what it would feel like to see the gate being opened. From underneath you glimpse a brilliant pillar of pure light, and the light is his face, calm and smiling, and you see his tears are tears of joy, sparkling with the light of the million stars above, reflecting light back and forth from each to each in a never-ending glow. You are awake now. The dream is past. The door is open, and from the other side spills forth such light as you have never seen.
Wow, that is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sharing. We're going to bring questions from individuals on and try to bring their cameras on as well. I think we're about ready to do that. But just as we're preparing, just put out there, what elements of a vibrant community make it evident that Baha'u'llah's revelation is universal and all-encompassing, both for Baha'is, but also for like-minded friends that might be followers of other faiths or no faith?
Maybe I can say a little something and others may want to as well, but I was just thinking that video is actually an example, right? And many people are asking questions in the box that refer to the current time in which we live, and we can certainly talk a little bit more. I mean, certainly this does place some differences in how we do things, but actually the vibrancy of community life is not alterable by circumstances. Actually, it becomes sometimes even more vibrant. So that video is an excerpt from about a 30-minute video that the Metro Atlanta cluster produced in collaboration with the House of Worship in Wilmette, the House of Worship for North America. So basically 30-some families contributed from social distances to the production of that. It's online, you can see it in its entirety. but there was no lack of vibrancy within the community or the cluster, because there's already this pattern of action where people are regularly studying together, and there really isn't a differentiation. There isn't like, oh my goodness, the Baha'is are over here doing something that no one else is doing. Actually reaching out continually and saying Baha'u'llah's revelation actually is for everyone. He drew this circle of unity, and actually everyone is inside, whether or not he or she is aware. So the duty of the Baha'is is to make sure that growing numbers of people are aware. And then, like Shannon and Khadijah, they can respond to that in a variety of ways, including these beautiful artistic displays that they had as a result of their encounters with Baha'u'llah and with the Bab.
Lovely. Any other comments? Don't feel you have to, but.
I'll just say that I absolutely agree. I'm sorry, Khadijah, go ahead. Oh, now she's muted. Sorry. I was just going to say, I totally agree with Nwandi that I think what I see in the Baha'i community is a reflection of the unity of mankind. We see people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all socioeconomic, everything. And just to see how we get along and talk and work together and think about what to do and how to approach things, it's really been just a most amazing experience for me. And I feel really close to some of the friends that I've made in this last year. So I think it's a beautiful reflection of that.
And listening to you, lucky are those friends too. It's so nice to have you here, really. Khadijah, did you want to add something, please?
I think it's really important to also reflect on the work that Baha'is are doing all over the world. The more I've learned about the work that's being done in Africa, in the Congo, in Colombia, here in the United States, we are in a time where it's going to be necessary for us to organize and come together through action to create change. And that is one of the things that has drawn me most to the Bahai Faith and to the study of the word of Baha'u'llah, because we're in the times are evident. And it's really important that we hold on to the message and the ideologies that will fortify us to begin to create this change through action and organization. And that's just, it's just so important right now.
Thank you so much for that. Wonderful observations all around. Let me ask Josefina, we've got a number of questions here. This one is directed to Counselor Lawson. Nwandi, can you give some guidance on how to lead a discussion about racial inequality with my coworkers via Zoom? I'd like to keep it simple, but need something that will be engaging and thought-provoking.
Yeah, I think one of the unique features, I guess, of the way that we learn, we talked about those 4 characteristics of learning: the elevated conversation, the capacity to grow through training and study, the ability to start activities that actually nurture the development of a community, and then finally the ability to help others. So I don't think that Zoom or any other platform really changed that. And I also don't think that there's a formula. So for better or for worse, I can't say exactly what you would say to your friends, because it would really depend on who are your friends, what are their aspirations, and when it comes to racial equality and racial unity. That would probably say a lot about what the discussion was like. But I would call to your attention, and I'll actually put it in the chat box as well, that you can go online and read the Baha'i International Community Statement, Eliminating Racism. Very helpful in terms of figuring out even what racism is. So I think part of our discussion and why it becomes very jumbled at times is because we as Baha'is, we believe that actually racism is a symptom of a larger disease. And the disease is the absence of the oneness of humanity. So if we keep just struggling against one symptom at a time, we will find ourselves very tired and the disease never actually goes away. It's like taking an aspirin. You may actually dull the pain for a few moments, but if you're taking aspirin to overcome a broken leg, it actually isn't healing it, right? So we want to actually take actions that heal the disease. So I would commend to you that there's some wonderful definitions that your friends might be interested in learning more about as they themselves think about race. That's the other element, is that Baha'is learn alongside our like-minded friends. And since we obviously do not know how to eradicate racism, we're trying to work with our friends to learn about that. So the conversation is generally based on the aspirations of that community. And then maybe some of the tools and techniques that the Baha'is have will be helpful.
Speaking of showing love through action, can you all give some examples as how we can help out getting more involved, taking in consideration social distancing? What can we do? Definitely a challenging time.
I can say that our study groups have not stopped, and we continue to meet on a regular basis through Zoom weekly. And my daughter's youth group has also not ended. They continue to meet on a regular basis through Zoom weekly. And the woman who runs the youth group will often leave little packages at the doors of the children. And it is the most beautiful display of love and care and thoughtfulness. Maybe it's a child's birthday, and so she leaves cupcakes at everyone's door. Or, she leaves whole packages of origami for them to do origami projects together. Love knows no bounds, right? So even as we are socially distancing, we can still spread love in all of these unique ways that I kind of hope continues as we begin to come together again in spaces to connect and fellowship.
You know, I have to, on the heels of that, just ask you and everybody else, it seems to me during this time, we're actually busier. I mean, it's going from Zoom to conversation to conversation. Is anybody else having that experience?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
And one of the things that
moderation is also called for.
But I wanted to respond to some of the questions about the issues with social distancing and Zoom, and certainly there are some differences, and it's not exactly the same as in person. But one of the things I've been really excited about is in Zoom, like some of our weekly prayer meetings now include people from not just all over the country, but all over the world. It's so exciting to meet new people from different places that have added to sort of what we do. So like Khadijah said, I hope some of this doesn't entirely go away. I think we can keep some of that going.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, it looks like we do have a few folks that are coming on here. How are you, Alex? Welcome to the
Very
channel.
good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your inspiring stories and broadcast. My question is about how the events during the past week has influenced your conversations and outreach. That's basically it.
That's a great question. Anyone?
Well, certainly, probably it intensifies things. I mean, we're all very aware of what's happening. I will say, and just this speaking maybe even more broadly than where I actually live, but the Continental Boards of Counselors do serve the continent. So when we look around, and let's just take North America, for instance, we can see that obviously the quest for justice is very strong, and the level of responsiveness that a given community can give it at this time really has to do with the coherence of its overall community building activities previously. So I think that there's a range of expressions, all of them very good, because they all come from the sincere desire of many people of good mind and good deed to further this. But what that looks like in a community that maybe hasn't been reaching out to its neighbors yet, isn't aware, for instance, that the Baha'i community building process, including the full sequence of courses, is actually available to all mankind, not just to the Baha'is. The response there has to be noticeably a little bit different than a place that we're already in conversation with the people around us. And talking to the leaders of government is something that we were all doing in preparation for instance, the bicentenary celebrations, when the Baha'is around the world were celebrating these twin manifestations that Shannon and Khadijah were speaking of. And we were celebrating the 200th anniversary of their birth. Many communities and many places around the world were, of course, engaging with their mayors, with their police chiefs and others, because they wanted to tell them about the significant coming of these twin manifestations. So it isn't just at this moment when there's crisis that they're having the conversation, but nevertheless, wherever we come in, we can continue to elevate the conversation. So I've been very impressed by both communities that have a lot of experience and those that are just beginning. They're very nascent in what they're doing, but they're striving with heart and soul. And I think that we're all learning a lot, in this process. I don't know if others have more that they want to add.
I can say that we've been having these conversations for quite some time within the Baha'i community, in devotionals, in community meetings. This now gives us the chance, I think with everything that's happening, one of the beautiful things in our study group and is that we've been there to support each other, because it's been a very emotional time in finding peace and sitting with spirit within. But so once you're re-energized within your small communities, you can take that and go out into your community and do, and that's been so wonderful for me within this community. This is not a conversation we just started having as after the death of Breonna Taylor or George Floyd. These have been conversations that we've been having for quite some time. And I'm hoping that as we fortify ourselves and we begin to apply the teachings of Baha'u'llah and the Bahai Faith, we're able to organize and come together and really affect change.
I'm so glad that you've said that. In fact, I'm thinking that, we have an extraordinary volume of writings on this subject from the Prophet of God, from Baha'u'llah, and his son Abdul Baha, the center of his covenant, and Shoghi Effendi, his grandson, the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah, who was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, for more than a century, and then in the case of the guardian, decades really before even the civil rights movement of the 60s, really drilling down very deeply into this subject. And of course, the Universal House of Justice. We Baha'is now around the world are studying a compilation of materials, letters over the decades really, from the Universal House of Justice on these subjects. So it gives us a grounding, and it gives us a profound sort of unity of vision on the process that I think can also be at the core of that. We have an anonymous question, so I'm going to have to put it for you, Serena. And the question is regarding junior youth. How has the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program helped equip you in knowing how to take action as an individual within your community? What qualities has it helped you develop?
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's see. I definitely think that, let's see, I don't know, specific, qualities that I can really, pull off the top of my head, because, I've looked all the books.
They're shining out of you, so that will probably do.
But I definitely think that my understanding or way of thinking has changed to become more I have to think deeper into things before I answer them. So I could think of an easy flat question, but then I think the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program has definitely helped me see a different, there's deeper levels to an answer or your community.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a couple of other people who are on camera, and until you're unmuted, I can't see names. So anyone just jump in with a question.
I can call on one person because, in full disclosure, that's Dr. June Glenn Lawson, my mother. So please go right ahead, Mom.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I am really impressed with what the junior youth do. And I, as an elder, I always wonder, what can I do to contribute to the junior youth? That's a question for Serena. I want to know, how can I contribute more?
Let's see. Wow. You can obviously like help with service projects. Like you can drive them, you can be a chaperone, things like that. But I also think that you can, I mean, you have to talk to like your local junior youth group, but I think that you can also come and be like part of discussions, and like you can voice your opinion on what you think about things. I don't know necessarily like doing the books with them maybe, but I think that maybe if you and your like junior youth group in your area can like communicate and talk with each other about maybe having like a night where you study quotes that maybe aren't in the books or aren't part of the books, but just your own kind of devotional gathering that you can like study, I think that would also be very beneficial for everyone.
Miss Lawson, it's so funny you bring this up, because I was thinking about how beautiful it would be to have the elders do storytelling with the youth, of personal stories of your own journey that can deepen their understanding of just the journey of life itself. And I would love to connect with you about that.
We try to keep to an hour, but we have a very vibrant discussion going here. So just out of respect for everyone, anyone who might want to leave, thank you so much for coming. And as well, I'd like to thank each of our guests, Counselor Lawson, Khadija, Serena, and Shannon. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank Josefina for the amazing work you do behind the scenes. Just a quick couple of announcements. If you want to learn more about the Rich Tapestry series and how you can connect with the community building process in your area, visit bahai.us. And if you aren't already in connection with a Bahai, or would like a bit of virtual accompaniment during this period, especially when we're practicing social distancing, in your personal investigation of the Bahai Faith, where you can ask questions, be guided to material that would especially resonate for you, and be introduced to Baha'is and community building activities in your area, we invite you to connect with our Baha'i Guide program. You'll get a personal invitation to connect in whatever virtual way you would like at a time that works for you. For more information, simply send an email to info@bahai.chat and write guide in the subject line. I'd like to also just mention that next Saturday, we're going to have a conversation with Esther Maloney and Shadi Tuli Wallace. The topic is transforming culture through film and music, processes that both of these young women are engaged in as part of their community building contributions. You're going to love what you'll learn there. I personally can't wait. So again, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, especially to our guests. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did today.